Hello, welcome back to Talent Thrives Here, our podcast where we talk to people managing people, exploring the stories of innovators shaping the future of tech and business. Today, I'm excited to have Rich Rudzinski, founder of Apollo Fractional, a company providing strategic technology and product leadership for startups. Rich is a tech leader, startup partner, and a self-proclaimed geek with a passion for driving growth. We'll dive into his journey, Apollo Fractional's mission, and his take on today's fast evolving landscape. Let's jump in. Rich, welcome to our show.
Lance, so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Can you give us a quick look at your career path? How did Mr. Rudzinski start into all this stuff on this tech leadership and tech business? Give us a little bit of a quick history.
Yeah, it's been a journey. Started in like the music industry and didn't want to move back to LA, so got in this cool new, area of digital. Originally at a digital agency down in San Diego. It's where I've met a bunch of my colleagues and started my network. Cut my teeth there, building websites and apps. When I tried to transition out of that role, had some difficulty finding a new position and ended up starting my own business, consulting. I ran a software consulting agency for over 14 years, bootstrapped that from my own consulting practice and grew it into a small boutique agency building custom software for startups, mid-market, and enterprise brands. And then over the past a couple years ago, I shut that down and transitioned into this new fractional model that's a growing hot new space, and really loving being a fractional leader, and kind of the very much doing similar things, but it's kind of got a new focus and spin to it, and I really enjoy that.
Cool, cool. And I'm curious about, I see it in my business as well, where especially the economy is a little up and down and kind of, I'm not sure, maybe a little fractured right now. And big companies are holding back money. They don't know where to make a play because I call it the Cirque du Soleil of the White House right now. There's a lot of sort of politics changing and the trade war and all this sort of thing.
Hmm.
So I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, I see potentially more avenues for fractional leadership and fractional contracting um, until things settle down, until there's a new normal or a status quo again. Does that resonate with you as well?
Absolutely. I mean, whether you're like an enterprise growing, adding new divisions, trying to stay on top of it, or you're, a young startup that, needs extra help. Maybe you don't have quite the robust founding team that you want. I think fractional leadership provides a lot of beneficial support to companies, no matter what the size. And I definitely think in this short term, it's very attractive, both for fractional leaders and for companies themselves.
Yeah, and I find there's a lot of people on the bench, so to speak, that've been laid off, and I've coached a bunch of them saying that when you're in an interview, the elephant in the room might be that they can't tell you that they really can't afford you full time, right?
Yeah.
But that's sort of potentially, and so I've told people to put it right on the table. Hey, I don't know what's going on, in the back of the company right now or behind closed doors, but I'd be interested in coming in fractionally, like whether it's a project or 3 days a week. So you get that senior leadership and senior experience, but the company doesn't have to pay the full ticket for it,
Yep.
and potentially build like a 2 or 3 phase kind of project where should we roll forward and go to market and things get better, the 3 days becomes 4 days and 5 days and so on. Um, and again, I think that's a reasonable conversation to have nowadays because again, this weird poker game we're all playing with, nobody seems to understand, especially if there's supply chain or anything crossing borders that might be impacted by all this different sort of stuff in the trade wars. That it's hard to plan out 2 quarters ahead right now.
Yeah. Well, and then AI disruption coming in too, right? Every company's like, oh, I'm going to fire my entire engineering team because I have AI. Oh, oops, I need to hire half of them back because maybe I pulled the trigger a little bit too hard there. And I think especially, fractional leadership also provides a great way to kind of test the waters on both sides.
Right.
Nobody wants to go become a senior leader at some org where they end up, not being a good cultural fit or run into,
Yeah.
bigger red tape where they can't, do their job the way that they want to or something. Fractional provides a great way for both sides to get value and maybe evolve that, like you were saying, into a long-term relationship, or
Yeah.
keep it more minimized and just continue to add value and impact. And so I really love it versus like the agency model or even some of the consulting model, because fractional is tied to leaderships more than just like consulting. But I also think like it has an alignment of like really you're coming in to help solve a problem, to help benefit that company. And I think it's really, it's not about your consulting, it's not about your team, it's about the impact you can make for any of your individual clients.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Totally agree. And do you find too? I mean, I've come in as a fractional operations person and talent person a few times, and um, I often liken it to sort of like a small town where everyone has grown up together. They know each other, but you're that new person that came in for, maybe you're a tourist, traveling through, and you need a haircut, and you sit down, and you can hear all the gossip, and you can hear all that. But you can do things and say things as the outsider that sometimes are easier than when you're a salaried employee.
Yeah,
And knowing that you're only there for, I don't know, 6 or 9 month project, um, potentially you have the ability to speak the things that some of them might not be able to speak because it might ruffle someone's feathers politically, or, depending on the management structure and all the other sort of things. So I think for companies, that's a benefit as well of hiring a contractor to come in and potentially say the things that, someone has to say, but no one's willing to stick their neck
yeah,
out sometimes.
yeah.
It's that the elephant in the room or something. Say it, say it. Somebody say it. Oh, the new guy will say it. you know,
Yeah,
but
I
again,
love
it,
that.
it 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 breaks the ice sometimes, right? It does. And if I often say, like, oh, if you don't like me, I'm here on a contract, I'll be leaving. So, I'm
Yeah,
not going to throw me under the bus if it's convenient for you guys. And then you continue on when I'm gone. I am just the tourist coming through to fix a few things. And, um, but I mean, there are benefits, I think, as you mentioned too. It's like a cultural fit, or, the date before the marriage kind of thing, or the date before
yeah,
the engagement allows both sides to kick the tires and see, do I fit here?
yeah,
Um, because it's one thing to do 1 or 2 or 3 interviews, but then when you get in, you start to meet and really get to know the management team and the heads of departments and see where the true challenges sometimes are hidden, right, in those interviews.
yeah.
And now that you've been in the village, so to speak, for, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks, you're like, and now I got a better sense on where the shortfalls are, where the gaps are, where I can add value, where I can plug some gaps and possibly create different workflows so that some of the stuff doesn't keep happening. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's often what my experience has been too.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think you hit the nail there in terms of, something that I was kind of alluding to with like the change versus like the, being in an agency before. Well, when I was up at the agency, it was about keeping my team billable. It was about like, maximizing my profit. And yes, we want to do a good job and deliver, but like I'm trying to run my business. And then as a fractional leader, I can do exactly what you're saying. I can come in and I can get really creative. I can speak the hard truths. I can come and tell you the things that maybe everybody else has been trying to say to you subtly and you're just not picking up, but I can just give it to you straight and be like, hey,
Right.
this isn't going to work. We can't do this. We're not going to win here. We need to shift. We need to pivot. We need to, whatever else it might be. So I really think it's you bringing in that experienced leader, giving them a mission and kind of like getting out of their way to some degree where you're like, we need this to happen. And this person can come in, they can bring new insights, they can bring new ideas, they can kind of shake things up a little bit because they're not worried about their W-2 or their long-term employment. They have a mission to do, and it's all about like getting that done in the best way for the business and for the team. So you can be a little bit more raw and a little bit more truthful and a little bit more creative in how you come in and solve those problems.
Right. And you find sometimes too, like you plant seeds. They might get to your suggestion, but it might take them 6 months or 12 months. But
Yeah, yeah.
and sometimes I find when they get there, they think it was their idea, but it was yours. But you know, it's irrelevant at that point. As long
Yeah,
as they get to it,
exactly.
right? As long as they get to it, then
Definitely.
somebody else. One of my buddies years ago said corporate amnesia. We can have this discussion 3 times every few years and no one does anything about it. But then one day someone goes, "That's brilliant. Whose idea was that?" And he said, "No one can remember." But at
Right.
that point, it's irrelevant. Let's implement the thing, get it done. move forward, because it's clearly, if it's come up that many times, it's just a
Hmm.
matter of getting to it. But I'm curious, you mentioned AI as well. I'm curious at how that's impacting your business. And um, when you're out there doing business development and connecting and networking with people, is it like top of mind everywhere? Is it kind of a sort of a bugbear or some unknown beast still to some companies? What's your experience from what you're finding?
I mean, definitely, the most disruptive technology that I think I've, experienced in my career. I've been through a lot of evolutions. I was obviously like the big Web3 hype and blockchain and the growth of applications and everything like that. But like AI is fundamentally changing how we're interfacing with machines, how we're doing our jobs, how we're running our businesses. And so I think it's at every level. I mean, you can't be a startup right now unless you have some sort of AI flavor to your
Yeah.
product. You can't be running a business and expect to survive unless you're incorporating AI to make your team more productive and to maximize what you can do with your team, with your business. Um, and I think a lot of the challenges are around people not understanding the limitations of AI, not understanding how they can best incorporate AI. I mean, so many products and startups these days are just wrappers on LLMs where they're not really doing anything profound, but
Right.
like they need to get AI into their product for investors, for growth, and they end up doing it in kind of a short-sighted way because
Yeah.
like just being an LLM wrapper is not going to take you to 10 million revenue or anything like that. So um, challenging times, exciting times, disruptive times. I think it's all these things and how you are tackling it and how you're letting AI, incorporating that into your business really depends on your business, the size of your business, what you guys do, but everybody should be, boots on the ground in this, getting familiar using it in their day to day and definitely using it in their products.
Yeah, I did a few months back. I did a 2-day boot camp run by a bunch of Indian tech firms, and it was just like a scatter shot of all sorts of different AI tech. And we had probably, I don't know, 10 mentors over the 2 days. But it did feel to me like India was like 8 or 9 years ahead of the rest of the Western world. They were just implementing and testing and trying and then going to market. And there was very few concerns for, shouldn't this be blah, blah, blah. No, just do it, get it done, get it done. And so, over the course of several days, I watched a television commercial, a 90-second television commercial made inside about let's say an hour and a half, and something that would have probably taken weeks to shoot live. Um, and the finished product for an AI product was shockingly compelling, like very well done. Um, and the fella doing it used probably 8 pieces of software, and everything eventually dumped into Adobe Premiere. So like final editing was done in a sort of a classic editing tool,
Mhm, mhm,
but everything else was done in either free versions or very inexpensive software.
mhm.
Things that you can think of 25 years ago we would have paid $30,000 for the software license or
Oh
something.
yeah.
Now we pay
Oh
like
yeah.
$300 or something, right? So that was sort of my sort of aha or shock was to see the final product. I thought it would look really like it was done in AI, but it was pretty darn good. I was
I'm helping
stunned.
this. I'm helping this startup 10 Zebra, and they are a video AI startup of very smart neuroscientist founder, really deep in AI. And his product uses a lot of open source models. It also connects with like Runway and some of these other top video creation tools and seeing how far, especially the open source, like open source AI is crazy how fast it's keeping pace with, with for profit and standard like private company AI. But seeing where that video has come in a year of
Yeah,
working, I've worked with them longer than that, but like just this past year, seeing what was being generated by the models previously versus like Veo 3, like it's mind blowing. It's
yeah,
crazy. And that's only going to continue. So like you need to incorporate these. And to your point, you're still using a lot of your traditional software. You're still, using some semi-standard workflows. You still need to go from storyboarding to capture to, edit and post and everything like that. But the tools you're using in between those and, your individual workflows for capturing everything totally changing. That whole
Yeah.
world is being mixed up. But I think that's a really good um, just highlight of how fast AI is going,
Yeah.
because it's happening in LLMs, it's happening in coding tools and everything else, but like it's so much apparent in video production because you can just see it. You're like, oh my God, that looks real.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's come a really long way.
Yeah, and lip sync. I used to work in animation studios, and eye movement and lip sync are critical, right?
Hmm.
If you want to have believability, when the eyes don't line up with what a human would normally do, immediately the audience smells the fake, right? And
Yep.
for me, lip sync has always been one of those things. I can't watch dubbed movies because I just go crazy. I was like,
Yeah, totally.
you know. Um, but clearly that tech is going, jumps I think every 6 or 8 weeks it jumps forward more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's amazing the pace. Things like this used to take 30 to 50 years. Now it seems like every 6 months there's a quantum kind of shift on what's happening. So it will be, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there'll be a lot of smaller independent studios doing work. These larger organizations will have too much infrastructure and too much overhead. Um, or they will incorporate small sort of skunk work studios inside them,
Yeah.
and they'll be like a specific AI driven teams. But I would think advertising agencies and that whole business of agency model is under massive shift right now. Anyone producing anything, there's a lot of code free tools. You can see the Python running in the background, but the interface is built for a non developer.
Hmm.
um, and I think the packaging of those kind of tools is going to they keep talking about democratizing things, right? It's giving something that would have been much more expensive, and it still harkens back to, I remember 30 years ago when the first Macintosh computers started to come out, and then Adobe started to produce things. And there was a company called Aldus that built all sorts of programs, and Quark Express was a big desktop publishing thing. And
Yeah.
there was a thing in the early 90s where all of a sudden people had hold of things that would have taken way more time and had to go through much more professional art directors and print houses, and all of a sudden, I don't know, 10 years later we had laser printers in our house. The whole printing industry went upside down. So it feels again like this is like a brand new wave of, we've had 30 years of some sort of progression that you could see, but this is a massive shakeup. This is big, and it's affecting. I thought the engineers would be safe, but I think it's affecting them now too. You know,
Yeah,
um,
everybody. I mean, I think across the board, and I think what you highlighted is exactly correct, that all teams are getting smaller. All teams are
yeah,
able to do more with less. And I think as any sort of entrepreneur or business owner, like you have to see that, and you have to figure out how it's going to work best for your company. And something that I've talked about is like it's best if that's a collaborative experience with your team. Encourage your team to try new AI tools, to find ways to increase their productivity, to take away steps in the process that maybe are no longer needed, with AI and everything. It's also done a huge shakeup to the startup world, because before, like, the technology was always like slated as the biggest thing. Like that's one of your biggest
right.
costs. That's one of your, biggest hurdles and biggest things to support. And now less so. It's still important. It's still important to do right. But like you were saying, there's all these tools now where non-technical people can get something out to market faster. And that's something that I always preach is like, it's all about the product. It's all about that product market fit. Do it with duct tape and spreadsheets, like
Right.
get it out there, validate it, and then invest in big software, invest in growing this out. But like
Yeah.
now there's so many tools and so many ways that founders can get their product out there, get traction before they have to make that big investment. So now it's allowing you to validate and move faster in the early stage, so you can get to a place where you can bring on an investor and they're going to confidently want to invest in your company because you already have customers, you already have revenue, you have some sort of product out in market that shows like you understand your customers, you understand the problem space. And that used to be so much more expensive before, take so
Mm,
much more time before, and now that's totally shifting. So how you're doing your product development, I think, really shifts in terms of like that founder mentality of like validate the space, build something to get you to the next step, and then yeah, bring on the technical team,
right.
build out your really large product. And even that, it's costing less than it ever has, and it's going faster than it ever has. So also, be aware that once you start moving, you have to continue to move fast because a competitor can appear overnight now, so
Right.
it's really disrupting the space. But to your point too, democratizing and empowering the individual, that's maybe less well funded, or just
Right.
has a good idea or something. So it's an exciting time. It's a scary time,
Yeah.
disruptive time. Yeah,
Well, I think we'll see too, when you get Series B, Series C funding, often there's like, okay, now we need to add 50 people or 100 people. I don't think we'll see those ads anymore. It'll be, we'll add 5, we'll add
yeah,
20,
yeah,
but it won't be, we don't need 100, 150, 200 people anymore, right? So that's a big shift too, just managing the payroll and the onboarding, and again, the culture fit and all that stuff. The teams can probably stay smaller and do a lot more
yeah.
with less human beings, right? So yeah, definitely interesting times ahead. But Rich, I just wanted to highlight, I mean, your consultancy comes in on a number of things, right? You guys can either inject yourself into the company or build a team for the company, and provide, scale up or down depending on what they need. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where I read your business is
Hmm.
flexible based on your client's need, right?
Yeah, it's really nice now because, like I was saying before, I had a team. We had certain expertise in house. I'm worrying about payroll and all these things. Now it's like me and my partner. We've been working together for about 15 years. I met him actually at like the first company I've ever worked at, and we can come in and we can get dirty and we can get into the code ourselves. We can work with existing teams a lot. Sometimes we take over managing teams as startups start to scale. All of a sudden, the CTO finds himself in demos every day and doing sales, like tech sales, and having to focus on that. And they need somebody just managing the sprints and managing the team that they already have. A lot of times we work with very early stage founders, a lot of non-technical founders who don't have a team and they need to build a product, in which case we have some great resourcing partners, bring on nearshore, onshore resources as needed to be able to scale up, build a product, and then scale back so the founding team can get that traction before they start worrying about like bringing on a hire or anything like that.
Sure.
So, like I was saying, the way that I can do my job now versus when I had the agency, it's just kind of flipped on its head. Like we can be so inventive with how we're solving the problems and understanding the constraints of an individual business and the goals of an individual business, and then building out a plan for them, that works best.
Great. Excellent. Good. I'm just conscious of the time. If people want to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn, Rich Rudzinski, or is it apollo.com? Let me Apollo
ApolloFractional.com.
ApolloFractional.com. Great. Rich,
Yes,
thanks so
sir.
much for being on the show. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can connect at a later date.
Yeah, this was great, Lance. Thanks again for having me. Talk
Very
soon.
welcome. Talk soon.